Greetings to viewers across the continent and the globe. This is Africa Speaks, where frontline struggles meet direct analysis and where voices from below take the lead. I am Vicky Wilson, and today we turn our attention to West Africa, where 2 years ago Niger became the center of regional and global attention. Exactly 2 years today, on July 26, 2023, Niger's military leadership removed President Mohamed Bazoum and effectively cut ties with France's military presence. This wasn't just a change in government, it was a clear message against foreign control and decades of economic dependency. Today, we are marking 2 years of that shift. And the West call it a coup, but inside Niger and across the Sahel, many called it a necessary break from an unsustainable order. In this episode, we ask, what triggered the takeover? What are people responding to today? And what does this mean for future political direction in Niger and the broader region? To begin with, we go to our spotlight segment with Daniel Otu Asante, who unpacks the uprising regions, the anti-imperialist momentum behind it, and the pressures Niger has faced since breaking ranks with France and the ECOWAS.
Good evening. I'm your host, Daniel Otu Asante. Now, this edition of Africa Speaks shines a spotlight on Niger, which is marking the second anniversary of the historic military coup backed by a people's uprising. The event that began on July 26, 2023 has set in motion changes that may affect the entire continent. We examine the context, the actors, and the unfolding socialist potential. On July 26, 2023, a military coup led by Brigadier General Abdurrahman Chiani led to the ousting of the then President Mohamed Bazoum and the formation of the Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland. The coup did not occur in isolation and was in fact accompanied by a wave of protest demanding the end of French military presence in the country. Bazoum was widely seen as a puppet to the French, and the action by the military officers was widely welcome in the country, especially by women and the youth movements. For the leaders of some neighboring countries, however, the developments in Niger were a threat. In the previous years, coup in Mali and Burkina Faso had brought to power leaders who had rejected French military presence, and the leaders of ECOWAS were worried. They immediately responded with harsh sanctions, with French even lobbying these countries to take military action against Niger. But popular opinion in these countries and resistance from movements forced them to abandon the idea. Irrespective of these challenges, Niger's new government moved ahead with meeting the call of the people, especially with regard to France. Niger soon followed Mali and Burkina Faso in expelling French forces in less than a year. The U.S. closed drone base in Agadez, the largest in the world. Niger also worked with Mali and Burkina Faso in announcing their departure from ECOWAS and the formation of the Alliance of the Sahel States. Over the past 2 years, these countries have set a new model for regional integration, devising their own flag and anthem, a passport, and setting up their own criminal court and human rights courts. They have also intensified efforts towards military cooperation to fight Islamist groups which have been causing chaos in their countries. Meanwhile, Niger, like other AES countries, has also been on a journey towards economic and political sovereignty. A key moment was when it announced the nationalization of the Sumer uranium venture, wresting control from the multinational Nuclear Fuel Cycle Corporation, Orano. Niger is a major uranium producer, and at a point, its uranium used to light up a third of light bulbs in France, while over 85% of its own citizens lack connection to the electricity grid. The CNSP-led government has played a major role in an economic revival, helping farmers who were hit by the ECOWAS sanctions and playing an important role in flood relief. Niger has also sought to reclaim its cultural and heritage since the coup d'etat on July 26, 2023. Several historic sites in the capital, previously named after French or European figures, have been renamed after national open African personalities. All these steps have been accompanied by the support of mass movement, especially those of the women and the youth. This provides hope for the future, but many challenges lie ahead of the people of Niger and the Sahel. How can this anti-imperialist sentiment, which is popular across the region, be channeled into creating stable alternatives? How can we develop together and achieve true independence? These questions and many more are in our minds, and we will try to address some of them today. Meanwhile, I'm Otu Asante. Good night.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for that breakdown. As we reflect on the second year of Niger's post-uprising trajectory, we move beyond headlines to examine what is really happening on the ground and what this means politically for the region. To do that, we are joined by Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jnr., the General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, who will help us break down why the events of 2023 weren't isolated, but part of a wider pushback against foreign-controlled democracies, the significance of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali forming the Alliance of Sahel States, and what the transition to military-led government means for working-class movements, national economies, and political autonomy. If you're just joining us, you're still watching Africa Speaks right here on Pan-African television. We are looking at the situation in Niger as it now. It's been 2 years down the line since the Niger uprising happened. In fact, the West call it a coup, but to the Nigerians and all people around the Sahel, they see it as a very necessary uprising. So 2 years down the line, we are taking an analysis of what has happened so far, and then what the prospect has been in terms of policy and economics. So we are joined by Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jnr., the General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, to help us unpack this and make this analysis. Welcome, Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jnr.
Thank you.
So to start, can you help us digest how the Nigerian situation was before July 26, 2023, and then what kind of regime was Niger actually having, and why was it so unpopular within that time?
Well, to start with, I mean, Niger was a typical neo-colony of France. It had been colonized by France, it gains independence from France, and France continued to use many levers of control, and one of the levers of control was the currency that Niger, was using. Niger was using the CFA franc. Under that agreement, Niger was required to keep all of its foreign reserves in France, So you had a situation where Niger borrowed its own money and paid interest on its own money. In addition to that, France controlled virtually the exploitation of all the mineral resources of Niger, including its uranium, including its lithium, gold, and so on. And the French also had a military base in Niger, which guaranteed their control not just of Niger, but their control in French-speaking West African countries. And in collaboration with other NATO states, they aspired to control the whole of West Africa for their own, benefit. Niger, like all the neo-colonies, followed prescriptions of the West in terms of how to resolve its concrete economic problems. And these introduced austerity measures, which made the people very angry. People were not happy with the austerity measures that they had to face and so on. And all of that created a groundswell, for what has happened in Niger today.
Right, thank you so much for that. So, as I earlier on stated, where the Western media and then especially the West, they portrayed this in the face of the populace as a coup, a military coup. They say a military government has taken over. But to the Nigerians, it's a different scenario altogether. What can you say about this?
Well, it started as a classical coup d'etat, no doubt at all about it. a few elements in the military decided to seize power. It wasn't a popular uprising. It wasn't true elections and so on. A few guys just took power. So it started as a typical coup d'etat. However, because of the dissatisfaction with the system which existed on the ground, and also the general anti-French feeling and so on, and then the aggression of West African states in ECOWAS and so on, it has developed into what is now referred to as the Popular Patriotic Revolution. And the Popular Patriotic Revolution is not just occurring in Niger, it's in Burkina Faso, it's in Mali, and there are signs that it's become very popular throughout the sub-region.
Great. So how do you juxtapose this uprising, or the fact that the people are rallying behind this government? How do you juxtapose that to the relationship it has to the demands of the people of the Sahel region in general?
Well, you see, in West Africa and the Sahel, there's a certain bourgeois belief that periodic elections amounts to democracy, you know. The people in the region are rejecting that. The people in the region are beginning to ask questions about how the ballot box has served their interest. They've been voting in elections, periodic elections, over a long period of time. It has not resulted in the creation of jobs for the unemployed. It has not resulted in the expansion of social services, you know, and has not resulted in a delinking of the national economies from the metropolitan, you know, economies and so on, you know. So people really are beginning to ask questions about the value of bourgeois democracy in the sub-region generally. And people are beginning to feel, I mean, if you take a place like Burkina Faso, you know, the current leader of Burkina Faso could win any elections anywhere in West Africa so easily. Whereas the so-called democratically elected governments are so very unpopular. Turnout in our elections have been very low, beyond the fact that the turnouts have been very low. The elections have been marked with extreme violence. They've been marked with vote buying and so on, and the governments have not delivered at all, you know. So given a choice, I think that people would think that what is happening in the Sahel states is more democratic than what is happening in the ECOWAS states.
Okay, thank you. Given that, as at now, we know that Niger has been able to expel the French forces from their land. And then the very foremost, or the main reason that the French were able to infiltrate Niger was the fact that they claimed to have come there to fight the Islamic insurgencies. At that particular moment, were they able to achieve that goal? How, within the span that they were in Niger, was that goal, the main reason they entered Niger, was it achieved within that moment?
Well, it's important to note that one of the reasons why soldiers led by General Tchiani took power in Niger was that the Niger armed forces were suffering many severe defeats at the battlefield, you know. And since then, they believe that they are doing much better in fighting the Islamic insurgents, you know, in the region. Now, if you take a country like Burkina Faso, where the French had a presence and so on, at the time of the coup, the government of Burkina Faso controlled about 40% of the land territory of Burkina Faso. Since the coup, the government now controls between 60 and 70% of the land area, with a clear indication that the French failed miserably, you know, in guaranteeing security for the people in the Sahel, and that these coup regimes, or popular patriotic revolutionary regimes, are doing much better at fighting the insurgents than the French did.
Right. Speaking about the Sahel, it would be so wrong if we don't talk about the Alliance of the Sahel States that has been formed. That is the AES. What has happened within that time? The fact that ECOWAS was unable to meet the demands of the region. What is ECOWAS doing as at now? What is the position of the ECOWAS, and what is AES also doing?
Well, a recent survey conducted in Togo indicated that the vast majority of the Togolese people would like to be in the Alliance of Sahel States rather than to be in the economic community of West African states. We are talking about 70 to 80% of the Togolese population wanting to join the Alliance of Sahel States. That's a huge statement. I mean, since these coups d'etats or popular revolutions occurred in the three countries, the position of ECOWAS has been to attack them militarily and overthrow their governments. Of course, it is this threat to attack these three countries which also pushed them to form this alliance, to build a military pact which says that the attack on one is an attack on all, and so on. As for people like me, who believe in the unity of Africa and so on, the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, whose objective is progressive, whose objective is to link the economies of these three countries, link the economies of these three countries from the metropolis and so on, is very attractive and reminds us of the Ghana-Guinea, federation, which was established by Modibo Keita, Kwame Nkrumah, and Sekou Touré.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go on to talk about what do you think are going to be the challenges that Niger will face as at now? Would they be able to stay on the anti-imperialist path that they are toiling as at now, or do you think that there might be some pressure that they might come under that might break them from this path that they have taken?
There are obviously challenges. I mean, governments which have behaved like the way these three governments are behaving have been clearly subverted by the West. I mean, Patrice Lumumba was assassinated in the Congo after a coup d'etat led by Western puppets. They dissolved his body in assets, kept his front teeth as souvenir, and so on. Nkrumah was overthrown in a coup d'etat in 1966, and so on. We can count all the cases of sabotage. And these three countries will face similar sabotage. With the emergence of this patriotic revolution in the three countries, it is obvious that the Western countries are trying to strengthen their bases in the sub-region as a means of attacking, the countries, overthrowing them, and installing puppet regimes. One of the signs, for example, is the request of NATO to Benin, La Côte d'Ivoire, and Ghana for the establishment of drone bases. These drone bases obviously will be used against the Sahel states. So I think we ought to be very, very clear on that. It's important for us to understand that before the patriotic revolution, Niger, for example, housed or was home to the largest U.S. drone base in the world. They've lost it now. They are not likely to feel comfortable. They are most likely, going to try to establish other bases in the West African sub-region to pursue their interest, and in the pursuit of their interest, these three governments will become targets.
Right. So looking at what has happened within the Sahel region and then the popular uprising that has happened, what do you think Africa as a whole, especially talking about African leaders, can do in support in form of solidarity to the people of Sahel?
But the African leaders who are beholden to the colonial powers, certainly have nothing to do in support of the patriotic revolutions that are breaking out or have broken out in West Africa. These African leaders are largely puppets, and they will continue to be used against revolutionary and patriotic forces in the region and in the subcontinent. So there's no doubt at all about that. But other forces, the mass movements, the trade unions, the student movement, the youth organizations, and so on, can rally together and express solidarity, with the Sahel states. They can rally together and insist that their governments do not have the mandate to join NATO and other Western countries in attacking these countries. Journalists in the sub-region have a responsibility to write constantly about the truth, what is really, being unveiled in the three countries as a form of mobilization and so on. For example, if you take Niger before the coup d'etat or the patriotic revolution was one of the three poorest countries in the world. after 2 years of the patriotic revolution, Niger today is the fastest growing economy in the world. And there's a story that we need to tell to encourage the people of Niger, you know, to make people aware of the machinations of imperialist forces against these governments, you know.
Right. So do you think that what has happened within the Sahel, and then especially looking at the wave of solidarity that Captain Ibrahim Traore had, I think, within the last 2 or 3 months across the globe, do you think that it has set a precedence for other countries, especially movements or organizations that are in the staunch position of defying the imperialist machinations and policies?
Well, every example of change, especially positive change, is an inspiration. Now, beyond that, you cannot make any predictions. I mean, it's an example of something which can happen. We can be very transformative when it comes to our backward economies and so on, but it remains an inspiration.
Absolutely. It means an inspiration, and then we are rallying solidly behind the people of Niger, the people of Burkina Faso, and the people of Mali for this popular uprising. Thank you so much, Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jnr., for this analysis.
Thank you, boss.
Welcome back. Well, if you are just joining us, you're still watching Africa Speaks on Pan-African Television. We've heard the analysis, but now it's time to hear directly from the people living through the aftermath of the uprising. In Voices on the Ground, we bring you a cross-section of perspectives from youth organizers, women activists, and everyday Nigerians. These are people who are most affected by the policy shift, and their voices are central to understanding the path forward.
I can say that about the creation of IS, Alliance of Sahel States. There is more like there are too much like advancement and also development, and in the Sahel states, maybe we can talk about Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, and especially in Niger. Maybe today some we say that they are not seen like a concrete maybe development or maybe some roads, but what we need to know at the first time is that people are feeling themselves much liberate, much independent today than like 2 years ago, and so on. And also about the not only in Niger or in Burkina Faso, in Mali, but also in West Africa, sub-regional, or even if in Africa. It's like a hope, because we can say that years ago, like left organizations are talking about how it is important for for Africa, especially French-speaking Africa, to liberate, to separate themselves from French colonialism before thinking about development or something. And people are seeing it as utopia, like they don't think, they are seeing it as a dream. But today they have hope, and they know that it's no longer a dream, but it's something and it's something possible. And IS countries are doing it today. And also, you can see, I said, people from Africa, a lot, like all Africa, Benin also, because Benin is very close his border with two of those IS countries. People from Benin also are very happy and they are supporting those governments. But government from Benin and same thing as Côte d'Ivoire, Ouattara and Patrice Talon, those two presidents, they are in Africa, is to respond as a French imperialist guys. They are not for people, and even the people today are asking for them to leave the power so that they can have a president who will join IS, because the creation of IS, we can say, is because the ECOWAS failed of his mission to make a regional economic stability. That's why they decided to separate themselves from ECOWAS, who is looking more as imperialist instrument than regional organizations. So we can say people in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, and so on and so forth are very happy about what is happening. And not only happy, but those governments are taking some steps which is giving them more hope. For example, let's talk about after they pull out French military bases, American military bases, and they say, okay, we are going to like have other relationship, other cooperation, even if those company, those China company who is trying to continue oppressing Niger people, they don't hesitate before send them out, because today people they have something, they want something, they want to go forward. They don't want to replace an old imperialist by a new one, and they want a partnership, a win-win partnership. If you are coming to work with me, you need to be sure that skills will be transferred between people. You cannot come with all your people, do what you need, you want, we will give you money and you will go back. And always we need to call you back. No, today we want to go forward. And in this struggle, we are not only. And left organizations, they are not only. And I can tell you that this all over the world, left organizations from BRICS, even from USA, Europe, all over Africa are supporting those IS governments, because we think that it is a path to forward to go for the real Africa independence. So that is what I can say about this, and we hope that this will continue, and maybe in 5 years, 10 years, we will see more Africa for Africans, not a Africa controlled by France, NATO, and so on and so forth.
Bonsoir, très chers camarades de la lutte. Je m'en vais directement pour répondre à vos différentes questions, tout en clarifiant que c'était pas le 23 juillet 2023, mais le 26 juillet 2023. Donc, après le 26 juillet 2023, le mouvement des femmes au Niger était majoritairement dans des domaines comme l'éducation, la santé, la lutte contre les violences basées sur les genres et l'autonomie économique. Beaucoup étaient liés à des ONG ou des institutions internationales avec des discours centrés sur les droits humaines et l'accès aux services. Bon, après le 26 juillet 2023, la prise de pouvoir militaire, donc on constate une évolution marquante qui s'est opérée notamment chez les mouvements révolutionnaires comme le Morphépan. Donc, ces organisations, notamment, ont commencé à articuler clairement les liens entre domination impérialiste, présence militaire étrangère et oppression des femmes. Donc, vous avez aussi posé la question sur leur compréhension de la situation. Donc, leur compréhension de la situation est devenue plus politique et enracinée dans une lecture panafricaine de libération. Je m'en vais pour la deuxième question. Donc, vous avez demandé des acquis pour les femmes au cours des 2 dernières années. Pour moi, c'est de renforcer la connaissance politique et d'analyse anti-impérialiste parmi les militantes. C'est aussi la participation croissante des femmes dans les mobilisations souverainistes et panafricaines. Par exemple, les marches, les conférences, les radios communautaires, etc., etc. L'émergence des mouvements révolutionnaires comme le Morphépan dans les réalités africaines et sahéliennes, et aussi les développements d'initiatives économiques, communautaires portées par des femmes dans une logique d'autonomie. Et aussi moins de dépendance au financement impérialiste extérieur et même à l'interne. Avec une montée en puissance de l'organisation populaire et solidaire. Pour la troisième question, aussi je vais directement pour vous répondre. Je pense que la voie à suivre, c'est la pleine souveraineté politique, économique et militaire des États africains. Donc, aussi le démantèlement des bases militaires étrangères, notamment françaises. La reconnaissance des femmes comme des actrices centrales de la reconstitution nationale. Donc, aussi l'accès aux terres, aux ressources et aux espaces de décision. Il faut que le gouvernement prenne aussi les décisions avec les femmes. Parce qu'il n'est pas sans savoir que nous aussi, les femmes, nous amenons notre contribution au développement du pays. Donc, il faut aussi le soutien étatique à l'éducation populaire, à la formation politique des femmes et de leur organisation de base. Je peux ajouter, ces mouvements demandent notamment au gouvernement de l'Alliance des États du Sahel, l'AES, de travailler avec les mouvements féminins panafricains et de financer leurs initiatives. Et financer aussi leurs initiatives et d'inclure les femmes dans toutes les politiques de transformation et de souveraineté.
And now we widen the lens in dispatches from Africa, a regional roundup of struggles and solidarity. In South Africa, the Socio-Economic Rights Institute, a legal and housing rights organization, has come under pressure. And from the view of Abatlali Basim Jondolo, this is part of a broader state clampdown on movements supporting landless and working class communities. As repression increases, so does resistance. Meanwhile, in India, millions of workers and farmers recently shut down key sectors of the economy in protest against privatization, labor rollbacks, and corporate domination. The scale of strikes shows the continued power of organized mass actions across the global south.
Thank you very much, comrades, for welcoming me. It's a great pleasure to be on Pan-African television because it covers the stories of original South Africans, ordinary South Africans on the ground. On the 17th of July, we had a protest outside SERI office, but the protest was mainly was against the fascist organization Operation Dodula that has an extreme xenophobic stance. And a few months back, the organization had released a statement that South Africa is for South Africans. And they have actually blocked migrants, our brothers and sisters from the African continent, from accessing health care, a basic necessity, a basic human right in our hospitals, saying that they are overwhelming our hospitals and therefore they should leave our country. They are undocumented, even if they are documented and they are asylum seekers, they are not allowed to use states provided services such as hospital and other emergency people require. We felt that this was an attack on migrants in South Africa. We felt that, of course, they also canceled in their posters that they circulate around. They said that SERI is unpatriotic and protecting migrants. They said the South African Human Rights Commission was also the same, protecting migrants, and therefore those organizations must be closed. And we then said this cannot happen in our time, that as the poor and marginalized, we must protect the human rights, but also we must protect our brothers and sisters because we live among each other in the community together, and we don't believe that our African brothers and sisters who are coming from other countries, just because they were born in other countries, they are any difference from us. We are all African, and we should treat each other as African. What divides us is capitalism, and capitalism was not produced in Africa. It was produced by those who colonized us and made us, landless and so forth. And therefore, we have said that the capitalist and the neoliberal agenda is trying to shift the blame on our ordinary poor Black people like ourselves who are coming from other countries, so that we do not fight against what makes us poor, which is capitalism, which is imperialism and so forth. Now our focus is actually fighting amongst ourselves as poor and marginalized and working class, and that is, and stand in the door of capitalism and in the face of capitalism and fight against fascism that has shown its ugly head through the Tutula and other formations and political parties such as Patriotic Alliance and the Action SA, who have been calling for migrants to leave our country because they are not for South Africa and they are not supposed to be in South Africa. And we had a very successful march, comrades. We had our messages that a march to Seri is a march to Abashad. You attack Seri, you attack Abashad. You attack migrants, our brothers and sisters who are working class and impoverished in this country, you are attacking Abashad. And we stood in front of fascism and we blockaded them from marching against this organization that has protected the right of Marikana workers, 34 Marikana workers who were killed in 2012, that has prevented evictions that are unlawful on the poor and marginalized, whether those are migrants or are South Africans. So we said patriotism is loving your country to such an extent that you welcome those who are born in other countries, that look like you, that have a same blood as you, that has human flesh like you. So we protected human rights, but also we protected humanity, and we protected Pan-Africanism, and we protected the African unity, and we called upon Black African people to actually fight against what makes them poor, so that it's not misdirected that we are fighting amongst ourselves. So fighting, causing Black, poor and marginalized people to fight amongst each other is extreme fascism that we are seeing through Donald Trump and other right-wing government elsewhere. And we will not allow it to happen in South Africa through the GNU or any other political party. And we are going to stand against it. So Operation Tutula succumbed and left and could not actually hand over their memorandum because we were there to defend Seri. They were calling us very, using very vulgar languages against us, that we are protecting migrants, and that they would assassinate each one by one of our members and our leaders. And we felt that this is actually the pressure that we have put against fascism, and we have fought against fascism, and we'll continue to fight against fascism, and we'll speak against fascism no matter how much the attack we are getting. And we are going to politically conscientize our people that an African brother who lives in Malawi, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and elsewhere in Africa is your brother and is your sister. And therefore, they should be afforded. We want them to live amongst us. We also want to go to their countries and also share the African unity, the African culture, the African unity, the African humanity, because Pan-Africanism is humanity. It's building the spirit of humanity, and therefore we will continue to protect it. We did it on the 17th of July, and we will do it again as we go. So we will go out there and speak against fascism. We'll speak against capitalism. We'll speak against imperialism. We'll speak against what makes an African child poor. We'll speak against those who have taken our resources and made us fight amongst ourselves.
Well, the nationwide strike, which was called on July 9 in India, had an unprecedented response from the people across the region. As per the records, more than 260 million people participated in this strike, all across, including the farmers, of course the factory workers, the workers from the non-organized sectors, and several other people and movements participated. The huge response which we saw on July 9 is basically a reflection of the anger and the frustration which most of the working class people, the marginalized people, the farmers have, not only with the government of the current regime, the policies of the current regime, but also because of the policies which have been followed in India since 1990s, what we call the age of liberalization. It is both the long-term and short-term impacts of the economic policies, which basically has made the working classes, farmers, and any other section of the society in India, all of them dissatisfied, and all of them, in a say, somewhat angry towards the government. And that's what was reflected during their participation in the strike, which was carried out on July 9. The strike had some, of course, their specific demand, which both reflected the demands of the organized working class, the demands of the non-organized working class as well as the demands raised by the farmers in the country and the common people. For example, inflation, rising prices of the essential commodity was one of the issues which was raised during the strike, which basically reflected across the sections, whether they are farmers, they are working class, organized, non-organized, and anyone else. As far as the formal demands put forward by the trade unions, it was the revocation of the 4 labor codes which were brought by the current ruling establishment in the country in 2020. The legislations, the working classes claim, the central trade unions claim, basically take away all their rights which they have fought for generations. For example, right to collective bargaining, right to strike was taken away, would be taken away if these 4 codes, which were so far have not been implemented because of the pressure carried out by the working classes, but if they are implemented, it will lead to the massive loss for the working class movement in the country. And therefore, they are opposed to it, and they want these laws to be struck down. Apart from that, they are also demanding a national minimum wage of more than 26,000 rupees for all sections of the working classes. They were also demanding kind of stop the attacks on the right to employment and right to work. Apart from that, the strike also raised the demands of the farmers, which is basically a legal minimum support price for the farm products, all farm products, which they have been raising again for over a decade now. They have carried out strikes. They kind of laid siege of capital Delhi in 2020-21, and so on and so forth. Apart from that, by the way, this is not the first time this kind of national strike was called. There had been several other occasions in the past 5-6 years, at least, when the working class movement in the country had carried out similar movements, national strikes. This strike, as we know, was called by a joint platform of all the trade unions. The platform is called the Central Trade Unions, which included most of the left-wing trade union movements, as well as some centrist trade unions, like the trade union affiliated to India's largest opposition party, Indian National Congress, the trade union which calls itself independence, like Hind Mazdoor Sabha. They were also part of it, and that shows the kind of consensus among the working classes in the country. It was also supported, as I said earlier, by the farmer movement, which is called a platform. Again, it is a platform of all the farmers' movement, and it is called the Sanyukta Kisan Morcha, the United Farmers Front. So far, the government's response has not been great, despite the fact that so many people participated. There was a massive response across the nation, which shows the anger against the policies of the current government. Despite all that, the government has so far failed to respond to it. In fact, they tried to demean the strike by calling it illegal. They tried to kind of also curb it at in certain areas, but they failed. And though their attempts to curb the movement and the strike failed, they have not yet responded to most of the demand raised, which basically leads to the conclusion, as the leaders of the trade union movement have said repeatedly, that there will be more such actions in the coming days until the government is forced to withdraw the 4 labor codes, implement the legal MSP, and other demands raised by the united working classes in India.
Each week, we highlight a term shaping political conversations on the continent. This week's word is Sahel. The Sahel region is now at the core of political realignment in Africa, with Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali exiting ECOWAS and challenging Western dominance. The Sahel has become a test case for what post-colonial sovereignty might look like, and when backed by mass support. But the questions remain: if this realignment has centered the interests of the people. Sahel, a stretch of land across Africa just south to the Sahara Desert. But the Sahel is more than a geographic belt. It is a front line of struggle, ecological, political, economic, and now a laboratory for African-led transformation. Geographically, the Sahel spans Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, and Sudan. Home to ancient cultures and resilient communities, it is often portrayed by Western media as a zone of crisis. But what they rarely say is why. The Sahel crisis is not natural, it is political. Colonial borders disrupted indigenous systems, and after independence, these countries remain trapped in neo-colonial dependency, tied to France through the Safer France, flooded with NGOs, and targeted by foreign military operations like France's Operation Barkhane and the US's AFRICOM. Billions were spent on weapons while basic services collapsed. What they called a failed state is actually a state failed by imperialism. In the 2000s and 2010s, France and the United States militarized the Sahel under the banner of fighting terrorism. Operation Barkhane, AFRICOM, drone bases in Niger, and all these were meant to secure Western interest and not Sahelian sovereignty. Billions were spent on military hardware while schools crumbled and hospitals ran dry. The Sahel became a battlefield not just of arms, but of ideas between foreign-imposed stability and people-powered sovereignty. But change is underway. Across the Sahel, people are now rejecting externally imposed solutions and reclaiming sovereignty. In Mali, the government expelled foreign troops and took back its gold mines. And in Burkina Faso, under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, land is being cultivated for the people and communities are defending their territory. In Niger, the CNSP is nationalizing uranium and electricity resources once looted for France's benefit. Together, these nations have formed the Alliance of Sahel States, rejecting ECOWAS interference and pursuing a sovereign pan-African future. These are not military juntas as the West media insist. They are liberation governments accountable to the people and not foreign donors. Economically, the Sahel is saying no to structural adjustment programs and yes to nationalization, food sovereignty, and people-centered development. Sabotage is constant, but resistance is stronger. The Sahel is not a periphery, but it is a vanguard, a declaration that our gold, our land, and our future belong to us, not as slogans, but as reality. Pan-Africanism reminds us that no African country is free until all of us are free. The Sahel is showing us that liberation is not theory, it is practice, and it is happening now. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Africa Speaks. 2 years after Niger's political rupture, the region is still adjusting. The road ahead is uncertain and the risks are real. But one thing is clear. People across the Sahel are demanding systems that serve them and not foreign interests. So from Niger to South Africa, from India to the Sahel, the fight for sovereignty, dignity, and accountability is ongoing. I am Vicky Wilson, and it has been a pleasure and a privilege spending time with you on this week's episode. We'll be right back next time with more stories, more analysis, and more voices from the front lines of Africa's political struggle. But until then, stay informed, stay active, and do have a great evening.